The Holy Gospel according to St. Matthew, the 17th chapter. Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with him. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud a voice said, "This is my Son, the Beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Get up and do not be afraid." And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus ordered them, "Tell no one about the vision until after the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Christ. I preface by saying, at this point, I am not entirely confident on where religion fits into my life. I'm standing here a little bit because of my mom, and a little bit because of our youth ministry team, and a little bit because I feel like it's the place I'm supposed to be on this day. But what is to say I don't belong here? Religion is a powerful thing, and though I don't have the same relationship to God as many of you here, does not mean I have not processed the effects it has had on society, history, and the individual. Sometimes the individual is me, an almost 18-year-old queer punk who is starting to face the reality of life, or my parents, both raised into religion and finding solace in God in their darkest moments. And sometimes it is a German woman who I never saw, but I still think about when I allow my mind to breathe. My pilgrimage to the beautiful cathedrals of Germany and Austria were not in the chase of God's voice. Rather, I sought to hear the echo of my own and of my classmates. This work, a year of preparing, paid off at the first heart-wrenching performance as the high ceilings rang with our voices. I wasn't expecting to hear a response that was not our own final chord, a call of a woman so overcome with her spirituality in that moment that she had to speak to us, like she was speaking to God. It felt as if God had come down from heaven and visited me, is what a fellow student translated. Speaking with her as our performance came to an explosive end, our music to stay within the history of such an old, beautiful building. And so, over my chocolate croissants at breakfast, I wondered, what makes a moment so surreal and beautiful that it feels as if a figure, thought to be the creator of all things, would bless the mortal world with their presence? What is so important that someone who is said to love you and know you no matter what would lend you their hand and be touched by the moments in your life, so small out of the billions of people on this earth? For me, it was hard to contextualize a set moment like this, one where I was overwhelmed with positivity and a feeling of serene safety. I know that people have been said to find God in little things too, however, so I began to learn that if one is attuned to themselves and their surroundings, any of our moments can instill such wonder. For me, these self-clarifying feelings are temporary. For others with faith in God, they may find the presence they feel to strengthen this truth. If at any point in my life I would be having a series of little and big events that are defining to my future, the time would be now. As I start my transition from high school to college, as well as a medical and social transition to a more gender-affirming body and lifestyle. If anyone is to intimately understand the idea of being a little bit of two worlds, it would be Jesus. Man and God wrapped into an ordinary person, carpenter by trade, friend of women who were scrutinized and men who were seen as foolish. He was a messenger to all the people. Like him, I bridged two worlds as well, at least in my gender identity. Not quite a woman, not quite a man, but content to sit in between the societal dividers of the two, finding joy in a balance of feminine and masculine fashion and the use of they-them pronouns. My official coming out may be a little bit of a shock to some in the congregation, a point of confusion, perhaps, as my presence here indicates a space outside the binary of gender, despite contentions against it. As easy as it is to reduce a person to just their identities, especially when marginalized, I am the same person despite the changes to my pronouns. Transfiguration, how it plays into transgenderism, is not about changing beyond recognition. It is about learning new realities and being true to oneself despite expectations or perceptions. Do not be afraid, Jesus had said, as a powerful white light surrounded him, identifying him as not just a messenger of God, but a little bit godly himself. Do not be afraid of change, almost a necessity for humankind, and not of oneself and the many sometimes contradicting factors of self. Even though the disciples wanted to stay on the mountain in the serenity of Jesus, they needed to accept and change. They too were afraid. All that once was is changing, and they were forced to grapple with the duality of truths. Change is so prominent in my life right now, being stuck at a crossroads, trying to understand what I want to do for the rest of my life and who I want to be for that life. Change is so prominent in our society as well. As power shifts between parties and generations, we fight for change and the impacts positive movements can have on our society. We cannot be afraid of this battle and the victors of it. We cannot be afraid of our neighbors despite our differences, and we cannot be afraid to witness a transfiguration of society, though it is much slower than the sudden appearance of Jesus' pearly white robes. So I'm taking my time, deliberate steps, forging a pathway down the mountain of my realizations. I turn around sometimes, backtracking steps for something I dropped, or a powerful stone I did not think much of when I first passed. Like all of us, including the disciples, the way down the mountain is not linear, and I am learning to be patient as I decide to dig into myself and my future by reflecting on my past, but with eyes always towards the horizon. When my feet touch the soft grasses below a rocky ledge, this is not the end of my transfiguration, as I will constantly be changing. We all are. Change is life's blood, and I intend to keep it safe, understanding its place in my life. As I move through my life, through college and my gender transition and the days I have to follow, I understand the promises I make to my past self, standing in dazzling whites amongst the rocks. My journey does not need to be shared in every moment. Some truths I don't want to reveal, at least not now, not here, and that's okay. The impact of the disciples and Jesus did not lessen when they promised to protect the man's divinity. Rather, an internal passion was ignited. Do not be afraid of yourself, of the darkness and fire within your souls. Do not be afraid of change and the fact that truth might not be conclusive. Welcome it with arms spread, even if God does not receive you, at least not explicitly. Your story, your mountain, and continuous transfigurations are enough to make beauty in this world. Do not be afraid.